Well, Bitcoin is the strongest asset the human race has ever invented. It's like gold with none of the defects of gold.
So define what the defects are. Why is it the greatest monetary invention?
So I buy $1 million of gold. Okay, if the price goes up, the gold miners, first of all, the gold miners are going to create more gold and dump it on the market. If I could eliminate all gold mining forever, if I could wave a magic wand and make it impossible to mine any more gold, my $1 million of gold will hold its value better because it'll be scarce. But gold miners are inflating the value of the supply of gold by at least 2% a year or so. And then if the price doubles again, investors will invest in more gold miners and they'll create more capacity to mine gold. So you'll create capacity to mine gold, you'll mine the gold, you'll crank up the rate at which the gold mines function. After that, people with gold jewelry will melt their jewelry down, convert it to gold bullion and sell it, right? If the price of gold went up by a factor of 20, you would be like converting all your gold stuff into gold bullion because it seems like a good idea. They call it scrap gold, right? And then after that, bankers will issue gold warrants and gold paper and gold derivatives, and they'll sell them short without the gold because they can speculate in it, and they don't have to have a one-for-one coverage of gold to the gold derivatives. And so that's called hypothecation and rehypothecation. Okay, if it keeps going up, the governments holding gold will start to sell some of their gold to manipulate the price down. Right, and all of these, and ultimately, if it goes up enough, someone will club you over the head and take your gold, or a hostile regime will take your gold, or a politician will pass a law taxing your gold. Right? There's a lot of ways you lose gold because it's physical. How do you cure the problem? Right? I mean, here's how you cure the problem. You make it impossible to mine any more gold, and then you make it possible to take custody of your gold personally off of the exchange or off of the bank. So that way the bank can't hypothecate it or rehypothecate it. Miners can't inflate it. Investors can't create any more gold miners. And then you make it possible to move it from here to Switzerland or Singapore in an hour for a nickel. And that way, if you don't like your bank or don't trust your bank, if the state of New York passes a law taxing it, you move it to the state of Wyoming. You know, if the government passes a law taxing, you know, the ownership of land in California, you can't move the land out of California, can you? If you have $1 million of gold in a bank and in a vault in New York City, you know, there's only a couple of places you can move it. You can move it to London if you have 6 months. Okay, so you're going to be subject to the law of London or the law of New York. Can you actually move to your favorite island, or, you know, can you move to the Cayman Islands and bury your gold underneath your hut in the Cayman Islands and be safe about it? Not likely. Can't even get it through the airport, right? So the problem with other properties, and gold is the simplest example, but the problem, the challenge or the analogy holds with any property. I give you a bunch of money and I tell you you want to keep it and give it to your grandchild. Do you buy a building in Manhattan? Do you buy a ranch in California? Do you buy a stack of gold bars? Do you buy shares in a company headquartered in San Francisco? Do you buy bonds issued by a government or a company? Or do you buy Bitcoin? And you can see the problem, of course, is the debt is devaluing rapidly. The land in California can be taxed and is not movable. You know, the building in New York is not going anywhere. It might be valuable to a rich person that lives in New York. What about a rich person that lives in Beijing? Do they want your building in New York? How are you going to hide your building, right? Buildings get property taxed. There's a very famous story about, you know, a bunch of luxury, you know, yachts sitting in Sardinian port, and the locals decided that it wasn't fair that all these rich people were sitting on their yachts in the port, spending all this money, but they weren't paying enough taxes. Now, they were putting millions and millions of euros into the economy, but they came up with the idea that they were going to put a tax on the yacht, on the value of the yacht. And so they passed a yacht tax that would have cost people millions or tens of millions of euros if they stayed in that port. And everything was happy, and all the restaurateurs and the hotelers and the entertainment people in the port, they were all happy, making tons of money off the yachts until the day before the tax went into place. And the morning that the tax went into place, the port was empty and the economy died. Everybody left because yachts are floating capital. It just moves. It's floating property, right? So it's a very visible example, right? Why it's not that smart to put an unfair tax or an extreme tax on a yacht if people can float the yacht to the next port, 100 miles to the left. So one would be discouraged from taxing stuff that floats. On the other hand, taxing a building that's buried, 100 feet down in the bedrock, that's easier. You can't move the building. So Bitcoin represents the apex property rights of the human race. Like I'm not disputing the ability or the legitimacy of a government to pass a tax. At the end of the day, they can tax your gold, they can tax your stocks, your bonds, your building, yourself, your income, whatever they want. But the point really is you're a lot more likely to tax the stuff that you walk past, every day on the way to work. And legitimately, you can move yourself and you can move your property, if it's crypto, to another jurisdiction, but you can't legitimately move a ranch in California. So your property rights are stronger and the value of the property is higher. Right? You have a valuable thing in Manhattan. It's interesting to other wealthy people in Manhattan, but when you have Bitcoin, it's interesting to wealthy people everywhere on earth. Right? You can liquidate $1 billion of Bitcoin on the weekend in any currency, any time. Try liquidating $1 billion building, right? That's a 3-year process, right? So it's liquid, it's fungible, it's desirable. And so that's what makes the asset valuable. And it's the most difficult thing to impair. Tom, once I had $1 million seized by the Argentine government, here's how it happened. I had $1 million in a bank in Argentina in dollars, and it was a U.S. bank. On one day, they simply passed a law converting it all to pesos, and they converted everybody's account to pesos in the country. And the next day, they devalued the peso 10-1. And 24 hours after they'd done that, I had 100,000, whereas I had $1 million before.
Ooh.
And they did it. I mean, they did it quickly and easily to everybody in the country. Now, in theory, if it had been property, they would have had to pass a law seizing 90% of the property of everybody in the country. That would not be so popular, right? To seize the property. And if they wanted to seize 90% of the property of everything in the country, they would have had to subpoena a court in New York or Delaware and get my appearance, right? And there would have been 3, 4, 5 years of lawsuits going on. And if you really wanted to take something, you have to kidnap everybody and take them to jail and sweat their private keys out of them. And that's not very practical, right? So at the end of the day, it's not likely that the governments of all the world will just confiscate 90% of your crypto assets or your Bitcoin. But in fact, it's a foregone conclusion that they're definitely going to compensate 90% of your currency. Right? It's happening at 1% a month or 2% a month right now. So all you got to do is wait between 5 and 10 years, and you're going to lose 90% of your of your money if it's in a currency or a currency derivative, and they don't even have to pass a law.
All right, my friends, let's talk about blue blocks. Blue blocker glasses have been a game changer in my life. If you're someone like me who is sensitive to artificial lighting and extra sensitive to artificial blue light from a cell phone or a computer screen, then you need to try blue blocker lenses. They are going to improve your sleep. And now there's a company called BlueBlocks who is elevating blue blockers in a whole new way with stylish and scientifically based blue light blocking glasses. BlueBlocks offers high-quality blue blocker glasses designed for any time of the day, for any lighting situation, with 3 specific lens styles: daytime, nighttime, and color therapy. There's the blue light day-wear computer glasses that filter harmful artificial blue light across the whole blue light spectrum. These are anti-glare lenses that can help prevent headaches, macular degeneration, and digital eye strain. The Summer Glow Mood Boost Therapy glasses block 100% of light in the high energy portion of the blue spectrum and can assist with migraines and anxiety. These are great if you work under intense artificial lighting during the day or if you're extra sensitive to artificial blue light. After the sun goes down, Sleep Plus blue blocker glasses are perfect to wear 2 to 3 hours before bed, which I do religiously. They can help with insomnia, jet lag management, and body clock alignment for a peaceful night's sleep. BlueBlocks is all about science, quality, and style. Their products are made under optics laboratory conditions in Australia and come in prescription, non-prescription, and readers. And BlueBlocks ships all over the world for free. BlueBlocks is offering a special discount exclusive for Impact Theory listeners. Go to blueblocks.com/Impact Theory for 15% off your order or use discount code Impact Theory at checkout. Once again, that's BlueBlocks, which is BLUBLOX.com/Impact Theory for 15% off your order or use the discount code Impact Theory at checkout. All right, my friends, give these a shot. I use them all the time. Take care and be legendary.
So when all of this kicked off, I'm a relatively bright guy, but when all of this kicked off, I told and this being COVID, I told my money manager, I said, look, I want to be as close to my money being buried in the backyard as humanly possible. And she just kept saying, you don't understand inflation. Like, this is going to be a problem. Like, your money will go down in value. And I was like, I get it, but I feel like it's happening slowly enough that I've got time to like get my head together. Like, this is so disruptive and so, Bill Gates predicted it, so I won't say it was unpredictable, but it was so surprising and unlike anything I had ever lived through. I just didn't know what was going to happen. And I didn't understand money markets well enough or finance in general. I'd always bet on myself as an entrepreneur. So I understand how to build business. I understand how to create wealth, but maintaining it is like a whole nother thing that honestly, I know a little bit about now. I knew nothing about it then. So I just kept saying, look, get me as close to buried in the backyard as I can. Then I come across you and you talk about hurdle rate. And then I was like, oh my God, this isn't something I've got 30 years to figure out. This is something I have 4 years to figure out to get to like a halfway point to where I've already lost 50% of my wealth. So I was like, whoa, now I have to take action. So now I start researching like crazy. Okay, is it going to be crypto? Is it going to be specifically Bitcoin? Is it going to be something else? And this idea of basically turning sunlight into cryptographically protected money is a very interesting idea. And so I'd like to know now. So those are all the reasons why, like, you can protect yourself from the government, but you have a compelling argument as to why I should be willing to stomach sort of short-term volatility. And why? Because that's like the argument. If I'm that average person on the street, I'm like, yo, literally last week, this lost like 30 or 40% of its value. So that's terrifying. So why would I be better off in that than, even a bond with a negative yield? At least like I'm bleeding to death more slowly than the 35% loss or whatever that I just took over the last week.
Well, Bitcoin's the best performing asset for the past decade, and it's 100x better than gold, and it's 10x better than equity portfolios. So the volatility is the price you pay for the performance that you get. And oftentimes the best investment idea isn't the most comfortable investment idea. I think if I told you there's 100% certainty you are going to lose 7% of your money over the course of a year, you might think, well, I have a decade before I lose half of my money. I have time to think about it. That's the status quo when monetary inflation is 7%. if I told you there's a 100% probability that you're going to lose 20% of your money over the next year and half of your money over the next 3 years, well, I mean, you might think you need to move faster. Well, what if I told you you're going to lose all your money? What if I told you the currency is going to collapse to zero in 3 months, which is kind of what it did in Zimbabwe and Venezuela? Or what if I told you we're going to have 95% inflation? I think the unofficial inflation rate in Argentina is like 85% this year. What if I told you we're going to have hyperinflation? Everything will be twice as expensive next year. Now, how long would you wait before you took a risk? I can, if I really want to, get you to jump out of the pot, right? I could just make it simple. Next Tuesday, I'm seizing all your money. Or you can spend it between now and next Tuesday, right? That really, what is the word? Focuses one, right? Right, it stiffens one's spine and focuses one. If I just made it very black and white, I'm just going to take all your money next Tuesday, or you can spend it between now and then. So how do you actually get comfortable with the volatility? Well, I think first you have to understand how big your problem is. And the second thing is one of time horizon. And what's your aspirational goal? For example, if you don't aspire to change your lifestyle one iota, and you're going to watch Netflix, let's take extreme. You're going to live in your parents' basement, watch Netflix, order Domino's pizza, and stream YouTube video for the rest of your life. Do you have an inflation problem coming? Probably not. If you want to buy your own house, you have a bigger inflation problem because houses went up 15%. If you want to get married, buy a house, have 3 kids, and if you want to take expensive vacations and have a house on the lake, you have a big inflation problem. Guess what? Luxury homes on the lake went up in price a lot.
Same with education. If I plan to send those kids to school, I'm really in trouble.
Yeah, so it really comes down to what is your aspiration, and that determines your hurdle rate. What you want determines your inflation rate, and your inflation rate determines your hurdle rate, and that makes a difference. I think in terms of historic metaphors, there's plenty. For example, my family came to the United States in 1736 on a wooden ship. Okay, and if you want to go study those voyages, they spent 8 weeks. Have you ever tried? There's not a single person that's probably got in a wooden ship with 3 sails for 8 weeks to cross the North Atlantic in order to come to America. The mortality rate is 2 to 5% on that trip.
Whoa.
The mortality rate to go from Europe to the Far East is 35%. It's insane.
Whoa.
1 out of 3 people that started the journey dies on the trip.
Whoa.
Okay, so we talk about volatility. Is Bitcoin bumpy? Is crypto? We're just talking about Bitcoin. Yeah, Bitcoin is bumpy. What else is bumpy? Yeah, wooden ships in 15-foot seas. If you want the definition of a rocky ride, the rocky ride was leaving Europe. So why'd they do it?
So you're saying that the bold are the ones rewarded?
If you choose correctly. Right? The ones that moved too soon, went to certain colonies, that on the Potomac River and the James River, and they died, right? So there's a lot of early settlers that took arrows in their back, in the 1600s. On the other hand, by the mid-1700s, by 1736, people had been living in North America, and you had Philadelphia and you had Massachusetts, successful colony and the like. So if you choose the right decision or make the right decision at the right time, you can have a better life, but there's still risk. Right? So why'd the people come from Europe? They came for property rights and civil rights. Right? They either couldn't exercise their religion or there was no hope for them. All the property was owned by someone else. And property rights matter. A lot of people don't realize this. They think that property rights are a nice to have. Property rights are a nice to have the same way that fat on your frame or insulin are nice to have. If I strip away your insulin, you're a type 1 diabetic. You can't form fat. If you can't form fat, you can eat all day long and you're going to starve to death. it's not a nice to have to store energy over time. Fat is an organic energy battery, and property is a social energy battery. So being able to store property means I can go 3 months without a job and not starve and live a life. There is no hope for a civil life without property. So, people went from Europe to the US for property. When they got to the East Coast, they went west. It's in the American ethos. Was there a bumpy ride taking a wagon train over the Rocky Mountains? You ever fly over the Rocky Mountains and look down? Before they had the railroad and before they had the highways, and then you ask, how did people actually cover the turf? It's like, yes, it was a bumpy ride. There was volatility along the way. I think the risk and the discomfort today of owning Bitcoin is a heck of a lot less than the risk and the discomfort of getting in a ship or getting on a horse or, getting on a wagon or walking, right? Or settling and doing what you need to in order to secure your civil rights and your property rights and your freedom. But there is an analogy. The only way you make the volatility go away is you make the opportunity go away. The reason you went west was because people weren't living there and you wanted thousands of acres to yourself to live a better life, right? And when you got there, you found that there was no one that had come before you to clear the thing, and build a house for you and give you running water and hand the keys to you and do your bidding. Because, you were going to a new place. That was where the opportunity was. So I think it's very quintessential to the American spirit or the entrepreneurial spirit or just the human spirit. What about immigrants? A nation made of immigrants. People went from a country where they had nothing to a country where they could have something. That's the story that you see over and over again. Is there volatility? Is there a risk? Yeah, always, right? Is there opportunity? Yeah. When do you leave? Look, the rich first sons of the nobles in Europe didn't come. Yeah, it was the poor, disenfranchised, the people that didn't have a choice that came. Right? The Protestants left Catholic countries. The Catholics left Protestant countries. The poor left every country. Those who were, hoping for a better life came. And, if you're sitting wealthy with lots and lots of stuff and a comfortable lifestyle and a comfortable portfolio, you might not see the same impetus, right? You wouldn't have the same inspiration to do something.
It's interesting. So the humanitarian side of this is one of the things that I find more fascinating about the Bitcoin movement. There is something very encouraging about the fact that all the people in my life that came to me with this saying, Tom, you really have to look at this, were young people. The level of awareness that they have had, and I have a lot of employees that sort of straddle, are they the low end of millennials? Are they the upper end of Gen Z? I guess it depends on where you split it, but they're sort of early 20s. And, they're looking at this as like, hey, this is the opportunity our generation has been looking for. There's finally a moment where we can really capture some upside. We're young enough that if we sort of invest poorly, it should be fine, that we should be able to make this money back up. They buy into the ethos of only invest what you're prepared to lose. These aren't guys that are doing things on leverage. And so that is very hopeful. When you talk about the beginning of the pandemic was this wealth transfer to people that basically owned bonds and assets. And now with, hopefully this sort of prolonged, and I think that's an important thing to note is, yes, there's volatility to Bitcoin in the short term. I've heard you say, if you're looking at a number in anything less than a 4-year increment, it's just noise. And that once you extend out to 4 years and beyond, suddenly it actually becomes a story of, growing, I think it's like 200% year over year, which is, pretty thrilling. How far when you think about this being sort of the apex property, how much goes into just the fact that it's taking sunlight and turning it into something that's cryptographically protected, and how much of that stance is that this evens the playing field?
I think of Bitcoin as like that shining city in cyberspace where billions of people will eventually want to live, right? Instead of moving from Europe to America or moving from the old world to the new world or whatever, we're moving from the planet to cyberspace. We can't move to outer space yet. I can't get 1 billion people off the planet and settle on a better Earth, but I can move 1 billion people to cyberspace. Bitcoin is property in cyberspace. It's 21 million city blocks in cyber Manhattan. The people that move there first, right, get to buy the land cheapest. And then, you know, how many people will eventually want to live there? Well, unlike Manhattan, where there's a limit, there's really no limit. Why wouldn't everybody want to live there, right? I mean, I don't know that there won't be other cities in cyberspace that might meet other needs. I mean, I suppose if the Chinese, you know, made it illegal to own Bitcoin, but there was a Chinese Bitcoin, there might be a Chinese version of Bitcoin in cyberspace, kind of like Alibaba, you know, and Ant and WeChat kind of branched off from Facebook and Google and Amazon. So there might be some other digital dominant monetary networks but Bitcoin is the greatest monetary network that the human race has ever developed, and it's certainly the dominant one right now, and it looks like it's going to be continue to be the dominant one for as long as we live. So what makes it dominant? Well, I mean, clearly the architecture is proof of work, or in other words, throwing up a wall of encrypted energy, right? It's all of the crypto hash power that's channeling energy through the hashing function, which creates the stability and the security. And so it's based upon the architecture, but ultimately the appeal of it is that it's an open, permissionless protocol that everybody on Earth can engage in. Anybody can mine it. So anybody can contribute security to the network, and anybody can run their own node, and anybody can own it, and then any company can plug into it. And so there's nothing that open. There is no monetary protocol or asset or currency that is so open as the Bitcoin asset. And so that's what's driving its value right now. It's an opportunity for people that have little to lose and much to gain. It's an opportunity for everybody, though. I mean, the way I think of it is, it's a moral imperative, a technical imperative, and an economic imperative. Morally, it's an imperative because it's the best hope for 8 billion people to secure their property rights. If I give you a $50 Android phone, you can carry around in the Android wallet your property, and no bank or no hostile regime can seize it. And and that's the best property right you're ever going to get. I think it's a technical imperative for the same reason. You've got 8 billion mobile phones that will all have property. And so what's more important, storing your photos and your videos on your mobile phone, or storing all your money, all your life force on your mobile phone? I mean, you're worried about losing the photos you took on your iPhone, or you're worried about losing your life savings? Clearly, it's more valuable. So it's a technology imperative for an Apple and Amazon and Google and Facebook, and companies like Square and PayPal and Binance and Coinbase are already extraordinarily successful by embracing it. You can see that right now. And finally, it's an economic imperative because there's $500 trillion worth of fiat derivatives, cash and bonds and stocks and real estate that's valued based upon cash flows. And all of those things are being devalued at 1% a month, something. So we can go back and forth over what's the rate of currency expansion, but you know, it's not that hard to see that this is a $25 to $50 trillion a year problem for anybody with assets on Earth. It's very rare that you find a technology that's the solution to every rich person's problem and every poor person's problem simultaneously.
What do you say to people that say the pushback I've seen on Bitcoin is, hey guys, sorry, I get why you're excited about it, but it's the Netscape of crypto. And, just as a technological layer, it was early, cool, yay, thanks for sort of proving the model, but this is never going to last. People will build something way better.
Yeah, well, Netscape didn't make it to $1 trillion in market value in 10 years. Right. If we calculate the amount of monetary energy on the network, Bitcoin would be more successful than Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, or Microsoft. In fact, it would be more, and it's, much more successful than Netscape or AOL or anything from that genre. Those things never got to 1/100th, right? I think Netscape, at its peak, was maybe 1/20th, 1/30th, 1/40th of what we're seeing in front of us right now. And the difference really is there is no technology and architecture that's appropriate to replace it. The solution to the issue of long duration asset or long duration safe haven store of value is a very secure crypto asset network. And so Bitcoin is the single most secure network in the world. It's the most secure database in the world. It's the most secure asset in the world. The way that you make it secure is through the extraordinary decentralization combined with the way that it converts energy into a very specialized SHA-256 hash function. So in order to attack that network, it would take extraordinary time and effort and energy and resources. It's pretty much the most secure thing we've got in cyberspace.
And what about people that look at that and go, yes, cool, you've built this amazing protective layer, but it comes at the cost of the environment?
The actual cost is, nominally 0.1% of the energy used in the world, but the economic value of the energy is not even 10 basis points. It's like 3 basis points. So you're talking about it's almost, if you put it on a sheet of paper, it would be like a couple of dots, but you can't even see it. The overall energy generated in the economy is like 160,000 terawatt hours, and the wasted energy is 50,000 terawatt hours, and Bitcoin is 120 out of 50,000 wasted energy. So it really is insignificant as an energy load on the environment. But if you dig a bit deeper, you'll find that actually Bitcoin is much cleaner energy than all the rest of the applications. Cars, planes, trains, automobiles. It's pretty obvious planes use fossil fuels. There's no hope for them not to. Bitcoin doesn't. Bitcoin is actually something that runs on electricity. It doesn't run on fossil fuels. Most cars still use fossil fuels, and even electric cars are charged at charging stations that are charged with fossil fuels. So the environmentalists ultimately are going to focus upon the energy grid, and if they want to shut down fossil fuels or change the energy mix away from coal or something, they'll do that. Bitcoin is the highest value application of energy on a wholesale basis that we have in the world. There's nothing more valuable. There's no more valuable use of energy than Bitcoin. The latest generation of SHA-256 miners, they will generate almost 45 cents a kilowatt hour in value, which means you can take them anywhere on Earth to the North Pole. You can put a nuclear reactor on the North Pole and run Bitcoin mining from it. You can plug them into wind generators 1,000 miles out into a desert. You can plug them into geothermal on an island like Iceland, and you can generate 45 cents a kilowatt hour. The typical residential electricity cost is 13 cents a kilowatt hour. Industrial usage in the first world is 11 cents a kilowatt hour. And all that energy has to be co-located with the factories and the people. Right? We don't have an industrial application of energy like Bitcoin that you can put anywhere on Earth. So what's the result? The result is that Bitcoin is used to recycle stranded energy or wasted energy. If you have a hydroelectric dam and you have a lot of energy, but you don't have people to use it, well, the dam is generating energy year round, but the people don't need it, but maybe a few months a year, or maybe they don't need it in the evening. They just need it during the day to run their air conditioners. Like air conditioning is a great example of a cycling energy use. Bitcoin is a perfect energy battery, because you can run it at night while the people are asleep and the air conditioning is off. And so you level out energy consumption on the grid, thereby driving down the cost of energy for everybody on Earth. And for any plant that would otherwise be decommissioned, you have a use for it if you don't want to decommission it. And of course, as you can imagine, the sun shines in the desert where people don't live, and the wind blows in places where people don't live, and volcanoes, and geothermal energy exists where people don't want to live. Those are three sources of energy. They're all sustainable, renewable energy. But if you know anything about power engineering, you can't move electricity more than 500 miles on a grid, period. It's a hard stop, a hard limit. If you happen to find geothermal energy more than 500 miles from Manhattan, we don't need it. And newsflash, we've already got too much energy, right? So even if you found geothermal energy in the middle of Central Park, we still don't need it. And so what if I told you, Tom, I've actually got infinite free sustainable energy, and it's 1,000 miles away from a city? What are you going to do with it? Well, the only obvious thing to do with it is Bitcoin mining. So Bitcoin is migrating to the ends of the earth, to the most sustainable energy, which is also the cheapest energy, which is also the greenest energy. And it's a solution to the problem of how do we catalyze sustainable energy? How do we get green? It's also a solution to every country's problem. You're in the middle of Africa with a waterfall and no industry. How are you going to lift your people out of poverty? Well, you plug, a turbine into your waterfall, you plug Bitcoin mining into the turbine, and now you have cheap energy that's green, that's plugged into a clean, hard currency exporter that pays taxes, that elevates you out of poverty, that's environmentally friendly. So I think it's a good story here. People just don't understand, right, just how powerful Bitcoin is as a force for energy sustainability.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like the attacks upon it from an environmental standpoint are relentless. And to be honest, I just sort of brushed them off based on the facts that you've given. It seemed like, wait, people just don't understand the narrative, or they don't understand the facts. They've fallen for a narrative. And until Elon Musk, who's sort of the king of clean energy, for the love of God, came out and expressed concerns over the environmental impact of Bitcoin. How is it possible, if everything that you just said is true, that somebody so into the world of clean energy could be against it?
I think we've got a lot of education to do. The industry hasn't published transparent statistics about the nature of the energy usage in Bitcoin mining, because the Bitcoin miners are very decentralized. And so encouraging transparency and gathering all the data and publishing it, that will be helpful, because there's a good story here. I think that the mining, the energy usage is not well understood. For example, 3 years ago, someone thought that energy was used in transactions. And then they thought, since energy is used in transactions, if we scale up the number of transactions, eventually Bitcoin will boil the ocean. And that wasn't true either, because the Bitcoin network never increases the number of transactions, and the energy usage is unrelated to transactions. And in fact, the energy usage is decreasing exponentially as the transactions scale in efficiency exponentially. But the model was flawed, and so people picked it up, and no one's published a better model. So we need to, and if you only spend an hour thinking about it, or spend a few hours, you might not understand the nuances. So I think that the industry needs to do a better job of transparently communicating the current usage of energy, and transparently communicating how it's going to change over the next 20 years. Bitcoin energy usage, for example, is exponentially falling. The latest generation of miners generate 5x as many hashes for the same amount of electricity. So in fact, energy consumption decreases 80% per exahash.
Whoa.
I mean, it's massive. And then after the next halving, it gets cut in half again. And the protocol keeps cutting it in half every 4 years. And the technology advances are doubling it every year. or more, right? And so if I double every year and I cut in half every 4 years, and the transaction efficiency is on, or transaction cost is only scaling with the log of the price. I mean, most people can't do the logarithmic math in their head, but if you actually, and they don't know the ratio between transaction fees and block rewards, but once you figure it out, let me boil it down to the summary. It's 200 basis points of the value on the network today falling to 120, falling to 70, falling to 40, falling to 20, falling to 10, falling to 7 basis points, going to 6, to 5, eventually getting to 5 basis points. And as it's falling to 5 basis points of the overall monetary energy in the network, the energy mix is rotating from more fossil fuel to less fossil fuel, and at the same time the energy intensity is falling because the security on the network is coming proportionally more from the technology of the hashing miners than it is coming from raw power. And so there's a lot of things going on there. If you're a journalist, you just write clickbait, right? And I think that they came across, there might be an example of one power plant that was a fossil fuel power plant that was used to run Bitcoin miners, and so that became a very colorful story. Well, what about all of the hash rate?
Well, it also got pretty colorful when on Twitter, you and Elon Musk were sort of going back and forth. And I'm actually really impressed, by the way, and I don't know if this speaks to your vision into stoicism and having stoic values, but the fact that Elon was razzing you may be the most generous interpretation on Twitter about sort of your views on Bitcoin and energy and all that. But then, I don't know, 3 or 4 days later, you introduce him to miners in the US that are really making strides into being green. I'm curious, why not, if somebody's coming at you like that, why were you so generous? Is it that you see yourself as an ambassador to Bitcoin and it didn't make sense to get into a pissing contest? Or is there something else going on?
Well, first of all, I think Elon believes in the power of crypto for human freedom and sovereignty and sound money. I mean, he understands the importance of the underlying technology, and he also believes in Bitcoin. That's why he bought billions of dollars of it, right? So he believes that, and so we all agree on 99%, right? The power of technology to make the world a better place, the power of sound money, the power of responsibility, the importance of freedom and property rights, the importance of decentralization. We all agree on that, and so Elon has concerns that we should be the good guys, which means make sure that we pursue it in a sustainable fashion that's good for the planet. And so, he wants to encourage everybody to be on the right side of the energy debate. So there's not a lot of transparency, and I think the industry was not as organized as it could be. So I said to him, have you met the miners? They'd love to hear from you, and can we work together? And he said, I would love to work together, and I'd love to meet the miners. And so when people agree with you on 99% of your agenda and they have concerns, and Bitcoin has either real or imagined energy issues, right? They're either real, someone could fire up a coal power plant and people don't care for that. And then imagine maybe people are worried that it's going on more than it is going on, or they're worried about the future. So the mature, responsible thing to do when you have real and imagined problems is to bring everybody together in order to talk about your issues and solve your problems, in the most transparent, responsible fashion we can. So he was enthusiastic to meet them. They're enthusiastic to meet him. We shared everything that we're doing. They shared what they're doing. He shared his concerns. We talked about solutions. And I think lots of good will come of it. I think that the miners will now have a platform to communicate just how sustainable they are and their goals for sustainability. I think we can put together clear metrics and models for the future that communicates to the mainstream investors and mainstream media and anybody else that's interested in what's going on. And I think that ultimately it's constructive and a way for us to all go forward together in an environmentally friendly, appropriate fashion that everybody can get behind.